Next story brings us to child poverty. Children in England are now facing almost Dickensian levels of poverty, with many going without basics like heating, safe housing or adequate food. A record of 4.5 million children, about 31%, were living in relative poverty as of April 2024, up by 100,000 from the year before. The two-child benefit cap is forcing around 109 children into poverty each day, and ending it could lift 500,000 kids out of hardship. There's been a lot of questions around this, particularly, Zoe, so after the welfare bill rebellion and essentially the hollowing out of the disability cuts bill that went through Parliament, MPs then, Labour MPs specifically, then seemed to turn their fire towards the SEND cuts, which is mostly going to children with disabilities and learning difficulties, but also on the two-child benefit cap, specifically because there was briefings in the mainstream press that the government was saying, well, as a result of this rebellion, we had hoped to lift the two-child cap limit, which is hugely unpopular amongst Labour MPs, but now we're not able to. And to me, if I'm honest, it came across as a little bit of punishment for MPs of, well, you rebelled on this, so we're not going to give you that. And I'll be honest, I spent most of Tuesday and Wednesday in Parliament meeting, I think I ended up meeting 14 MPs over the course of the 2 days. They were very unhappy.
Yeah, it's not a good line to trot out to your backbenchers, I don't think, that, oh, well, we were about to lift 500,000 kids out of poverty, but then you forced our hand with disabled people. I mean, a Labour government should be doing both, right? So I think it's not the argument they think it is. It's not going to win them more support. On this particular report, it really is horrific reading. I mean, in one part, the Children's Commissioner, Rachel D'Souza, talks about a child she interviewed who was worried to have friends stay over because he would get woken up in the night with rats biting his face, mice biting his face. I mean, it's really horrendous that and we're seeing the NHS warn of the return of Victorian illnesses like rickets and scurvy because of malnutrition, and teachers talking about how they're not having enough time in the day to just go about their actual teaching duties because they're having to look after children and the impact of poverty.
Yeah,
I think it's important.
And a lot of teachers having to bring food into the classroom just so the kids have something to eat because they'll come without having breakfast or having a warm.
And I think what's really key about this is when Labour came in, they talked a lot about social mobility, right? And they talked a lot about wanting to give kids the best start in life and that everyone deserves to have the best start in life. And they wanted to remove the barriers to opportunity. And in that, they talked at the beginning of their manifesto in that section about how the last Labour government lifted, I can't remember the exact number, maybe 1 million people out of poverty or something like that, probably more than that, and that they would do the same. And, they have done some good things, free breakfast clubs, the expansion of 3 school meals, reinstating some of the Sure Start principles. I think these are important things, but all of it is undermined if at the very beginning a child is hungry and dirty and tired and living in poverty. You can't just tweak at the end of the system if you're not fixing the fundamental factors, which is that if a child is born at the bottom of a sinkhole and you don't do anything to lift them out of it, none of those things are going to make any difference. A child cannot learn if they're hungry, if they haven't eaten in a day, if they are facing malnutrition. So it undermines, without actively trying to do this, it undermines their whole ethos. And I think one is really key, the Children's Commissioner says, there are lots of different things the government need to do to decrease child poverty levels, but absolutely they need to remove the two-child benefit cap. I mean, nothing can be done without that. And it's very, very clear that has to be the basis of any child poverty strategy.
Yeah,
so it's very hard for the government to continue defending not lifting it when it costs like just over 3 billion. It's not a huge amount, really.
Yeah, so that number that you were referring to about the last Labour government, so from 1998 to 2010, over 1 million children were lifted out of poverty, and it's been one of the main talking points and one of the main boasts from Labour politicians about the last Labour government and what they were able to do in government. And I think this is a particular sticking point and a real frustration from Labour MPs, because I think you're right. The situation that we find ourselves in is a national scandal. The amount of children that live in poverty, and the quote that I used in the lead up was an almost Dickensian levels of poverty, and that's true. Like you're talking about children without heating, without safe housing, no adequate food. 4.5 million children living in relative poverty as of April 2024. That's not something that you can sort of scope over or twiddle your spreadsheets over where you find it. And it's very clear that the often in politics you don't have like a silver bullet to fix things, and you don't have that here either. But there is one very simple lever that can be pulled, which would lift 500,000 kids out of hardship immediately, and that's the 2-child limit. And what really frustrates me is, the sort of the deranged right-wing commentary on this about how people who can't afford 1 kid are having 2, and people who can't afford 2 kids are having 3, and the state shouldn't be rewarding the decisions by these families. Even if that was true, which it isn't, you cannot punish the child. The child has done nothing wrong. The child didn't have any autonomy to be born, or what family they're born in, what location they're born in, or what economic status that they're born in. And so the state has an absolutely fundamental duty of care to children who live in poverty, to make sure that they're fed, to make sure that they're warm, to make sure that they have a roof over their heads. And this deranged right-wing conspiracy nutter alt-right sort of conversation around the fact that parents are making foolish decisions, having more kids, has nothing to do with it, because the punishment cannot be laid on the children for any decision that the parents make, even though even that narrative isn't true. But if it was, you just cannot punish the kids. And I think MPs are frustrated, increasingly angry at the government, because this should be bread and butter for a Labour government. This is what people expect from a Labour government. And I feel like this is what Labour's missing a little bit in their understanding, because their frustration is, why are we being held to a different standard to the Conservatives? They created a lot of these problems. And that's true. 14 years of Conservative government is why we are where we are. But people have different expectations on a Labour government. They voted for a Labour government because they thought it would be different. And to not be different, to continue, everything from winter fuel to 2-child policy to disability cuts, this isn't what people expected when they voted for a Labour government. And that's why there's a difference of opinion. And a lot of the frustrations, from people out on the street in real life are, what they're talking about is when there was, all this bluster from people like Trump and generals and others about defense spending and as in relation to GDP, we found that money very quickly. But when children are having rats biting their face, waking them up, and no food in their bellies when they go to school, why is it suddenly such the fiscal rule so constraining?